Welcome to another episode of VGN Weekly. Members of the Virtual Grip crew will recap the previous week's races and bring us one-on-one interviews with racers, league owners, and commentators, as well as others from within the sim racing community. Please like and subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of our broadcasts. If you are a league owner or potential sponsor and have a broadcasting need, please visit virtualgrip.net for info on how to get in touch with us. Thanks for tuning in today. Now let's go find some grip.
Thursday night was Race 6 in Red Light Racing's Skidder Creek SK Modified Series at Lanier National Speedway. After dominating last week's race, leading every lap, Eric Stout once again captured the pole at Lanier for 100 laps of action. Stout jumped out to an early lead over A.J. Hamill for the first quarter of the race, when Chris Hazlip got into the rear of Bruce Pearson, bringing out the first yellow flag of the night. Cautions breed cautions at a short track like Lanier, and a big stack-up in Turn 4 slowed the field for the second time on lap 39. Stout maintained control of the race through each and every restart, but Brian Bianchi started to charge through the field and would restart alongside Stout for a green-white checkered attempt. Eric Stout would execute a fantastic restart and once again go wire to wire, leading the last 202 laps in a row in the Red Light Racing Skidder Creek SK Modified Series. Can anyone stop him? Tune in to VGN next Thursday night when the series turns right and left for the only road race of the season at Watkins Glen. On Saturday, February 15th, the Bootleg Racing League's Outlaw Modified Series held Round 7 of Season 38 at Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway. Scott Negus of Blue Oval Racing started on the pole alongside Bruce Pearson and quickly took the lead. Early in the race, Donnie Moore made an aggressive charge, advancing from 6th to 2nd place within the first 22 laps. But this push caused his pace to drop as the race continued. Despite his declining speed, Moore's defensive driving frustrated the drivers behind him, which helped Negus maintain his lead. With 10 laps left, Todd Liston passed Donnie Moore and finished in the 2nd position, while Scott Negus cruised to the victory. Moore's defensive driving helped him reduce Aiden Young's championship lead to 7 points, while James Lowe also moved up in the standing and is now only 14 points out of first. Bootleg Racing League's Late Model Invitational Series rounded out the BRL doubleheader Saturday night with Round 7 of Season 29 at Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway. Ed Springer led the field to the green flag alongside the double deuce, Bruce Pearson, and it was Pearson who crossed under Springer before the end of lap 1 to take the lead. But a stack up behind them would bring the caution out, with Kurt Smith going around off the bumper of Aiden Young in front of a large part of the field. After the restart, the drivers settled in for a green flag run with Pearson in control until lap 24, when Mr. Aggressive Chris Davis dove to the inside to take the lead away. Davis would control the race until James Lowe, who had been following the 7 machine closely over the previous 25 laps, took a run to the inside to take his number 99 hot rod to the point, just past the halfway point of the race. A string of late race cautions made James Lowe have to work extremely hard on the restarts to maintain his position in the lead. And a great launch on the lap 98 restart would give Lowe the advantage he needed to take the win at Nashville Fairgrounds over Aiden Young, who stretched his points lead to 8 over Joseph Snyder, headed into Round 8 next weekend. On Sunday, February 16th, the Yesteryear Racing Cup Series kicked off Season 8 with a race at Daytona International Speedway. Bill Martin started on the pole, but Chris Bates controlled the early laps. Green flag pit stops began on lap 43, but Lee Warsdell got loose exiting pit road, causing a multi-car wreck and a caution that trapped some of the drivers off the lead lap while allowing others to pit without losing positions. As racing resumed, Tom Ogle, with help from Dale Copeland, led the field. The field remained tight until a long green flag run split up the pack, and defending champion Josh Robinson then led a 7-car breakaway. A pit stop cycle on lap 85 kept Robinson in control, while Bruce Pearson attempted to stretch his fuel in hopes of a caution. but Robinson reassumed the lead as Pearson was forced to pit. Coming to the white flag, Jerry Isaacs moved to the outside of Robinson, shuffling Robinson back. Mark Fish and Isaacs battled side by side through the final corner, but with a push from Copeland, Fish edged ahead at the line to take the victory for Team Miata. Copeland finished second, Isaacs rounding out the podium. The OBRL heads to Atlanta Motor Speedway for round 2 next Sunday, February 23rd.
All right, welcome back to VGN Weekly. I am your host, J.R. Shepard, and I'm here this week with Alan Wannamaker. Alan is the founder of Yesteryear Racing League, along with the Yesteryear IROC series that is coming up here in a couple of weeks, and that's extremely cool. But before I get into that, Alan, just thank you for joining us this week, man.
Yeah, man, it's good to be here, JR. Good to see you and Ryan behind the controls. Raced with Ryan not too long ago at the 24-hour. We had a good time. So,
yeah, that's something else that we can talk about. I ran the 24 hours. It's exciting to do those endurance races. You do much of that besides this recent one?
Not really. I do more, but it just takes so long to learn the tracks, and it really becomes a time thing. So, road racing and short track racing are my sort of poisons, if you will, and short track's a little bit easier to learn the track than some of the road courses. So maybe when I get older and retire, I'll do more road, but right now I do it sporadically.
It's definitely enjoyable for sure. Once you get used to it, it does take some adjustment for sure. Hey, Alan, I want to start out by talking about some of the interesting things that you kind of had going on in real life recently. So I've seen some of the pictures and the videos that you've been posting. You spent this past weekend down at the Clash at Bowman Gray. Tell us about that experience, man.
Yeah, I was down at the Clash with first time I've ever been to the Clash with my two of my first cousins and my brother, who all still live in North Carolina. My two cousins live outside of Raleigh. My brother lives in High Point, which is the Triad. For those who don't know, the Triad is Greensboro, Winston-Salem, and High Point. And my hometown is Winston-Salem, so when they said they were going to have the Clash at Bowman Gray, and the Grand National cars, what I call Cup cars now, haven't raced there since 1971. I'm like, man, I got to be there because I grew up going to Bowman Gray in the 80s and early 90s. I left Winston-Salem in the mid 90s. I'm 55, so people can do the math, but I had to be there for that, and I just couldn't miss the Clash.
Yeah, it's definitely an awesome experience, awesome to watch on TV. And I know you said you're from around the Winston-Salem area, correct, originally?
Yeah, I am, and a little tidbit of history. Of course, I'm Mr. Yesteryear, so that's part of what I do. But a little tidbit of history is Bowman Gray was a was a works project coming out of the Depression. You know, they sort of the New Deal, Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal, they tried to put people back to work. And they broke ground in 1936. The federal government paid about 60% of the $85,000 that it cost to build Bowman Gray. Of course, that was about $2 million in today's dollars. This guy named Bowman Gray, who was the CEO of R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company at the time, Winston-Salem's most famous company, he threw in the other $35,000 and got the stadium named after him. So I believe they raced horses there. I think it opened in 1939. They raced horses there for a while, and very quickly there was a dirt place. They quickly started racing cars there. I believe in 1939 as well, and the first NASCAR sanctioned race was held there in 1949. Of course, that was the first year NASCAR was around, and you know, everybody's raced there. I mean, you had Fannie Flock and you had the Pettys and the Earnhardts, Jarrett. I mean, Allison's. They've all raced there, and so it was a little bit like whenever I don't know if have you ever been to, I'm curious if you've ever been to Bowman Gray, JR.
I have not. I'm very jealous of those that have, and that kind of brings me up to some other questions. So, what really got me hooked, and we'll get into some of the modified stuff here in a little bit, but what really got me hooked at Bowman Gray is back in, I believe it was 2010, when they had the Madhouse TV show. TV series that followed the local racers at Bowman Gray. That's what got me excited about modifieds, because up until that point, I had not watched a whole lot of it. So being able to see those modifieds and what they did each and every week at Bowman Gray was exciting. But then I started following the national tour and stuff because of that. So that was something that I had not heard of. I'd heard of Bowman Gray, didn't really realize the type of racing that occurred there. And the biggest thing, and you can probably talk to this, is how the fans are at Bowman Gray. Just talk about how those weekly fans are.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of night and day compared to, they had, I think, the Clash at the LA Coliseum the past few years. And, they went from sort of having it in a big Coliseum and probably handing out free tickets to, the college students at, USC, UCLA, around the area, who didn't really know much about NASCAR, to kind of bringing it to Bowman Gray, which Bowman Gray seats about 17,000. There's probably about 20,000 there in the stands because, they did some standing room only stuff and built a few things. But, every single person at Bowman Gray is highly educated on, they can talk the lingo of, loose, tight, stagger. I mean, everybody just kind of knows what's going on. And so it was sort of a night and day kind of deal with them having it at Bowman Gray, and it was a really interesting. It was good. It was kind of like being back home. If anybody, the closest thing I guess I can describe it as, if you've ever been to, I'm in Boston now. I've living in New England since 2002, and I'm a big Red Sox fan. If you've ever been to Fenway Park, or if you've ever been to Wrigley Field in Chicago, these old stadiums where you just walk in and it's just oozing with history, like, man, Babe Ruth played here. That's exactly what it's like going into Bowman Gray. Bowman Gray is the ultimate bull ring. There isn't really a more famous bull ring in the country, and it's just the racing was racing. The TV stuff was a little bit of a double-edged sword in that there were two series and then one special, I think, that Flow Racing did on the track, I think it was called the Madhouse. And of course, when you're doing entertainment, you're going to make edits and cuts and do what you do. And, the output is, it looks like it's the WWF. It looks like Hulk Hogan's going to, come out of a car or something. And that's actually, yes, some of that does happen, but it is rare, man. It is a racetrack first and foremost. And I think there's a lot of people actually eating crow after Sunday because, I heard a lot of, oh my gosh, this is going to be a disaster. They're never going to finish the race. This is just going to take forever. And let me tell you, man, it was racy. It was like, Ryan Preece, who's a short track modified guru, he was like passing like 3 cars on the outside. They went 3 wide at one point. It was like way racier than the Coliseum, and I think way racier than a lot of people expected. So, but yeah, it was wild, man.
Yeah, and I'd heard the same things, leading up to this weekend. Everybody saying, "Oh, it's going to take forever to get the race finished. The caution laps don't count. There's going to be tons of cautions." And yeah, that's not what we saw. We saw some beating and banging in the qualifying type races or the last chance qualifier. But other than that, yeah, it was racing and looked very professional. And I think it. Showcased what Bowman Gray's capable of putting on. And like you said, some of the TV shows kind of only showed the negative or the fighting parts. But yeah, I think Bowman Gray's a fantastic facility and definitely deserves to have more attention in the future, if nothing else, just because of the history that's there. Got to be able to promote where you came from to get to where you're going. So, absolutely.
Yeah, it was, one of the things the other thing that was really, I was a little shocked by, the modifieds. I was expecting the modifieds to be probably about as loud, maybe even a bit louder than the Cup cars. That wasn't the case, actually. I don't know what, the modifieds, 500, 550 horsepower, or whatever. I think the Cup cars have about 670, 680. But Bowman Gray, for anybody that's never been, it's kind of like if you've ever been to Ann Arbor, Michigan, to the big house and gone to a football game. You're walking up to the stadium and you're like, "Where's the stadium?" And then you walk through the gates and it's sunk in the ground. It's down. It's beneath you. Bowman Gray, you walk up a hill to get there. It's very kind of hilly around there, but you walk up a hill, but then it's flat. And once you walk in, it's a sunken sort of stadium and a lot of concrete. And man, when the cars got going, it was, I guess the best way I could describe it, it was probably the sound. It was the sound of American muscle. That's what it was, man. It was like the sound of American muscle. It was unbelievable. And then it started just echoing through the stands. And, one of the things that really got me was, and I haven't watched, I'll be honest, man, I haven't watched NASCAR probably a full season since 2004. It's been about 20 years. I'll catch a race here and there, maybe Daytona, of course, maybe a short track here or there, but it got to be, just some of the rules and the manufactured entertainment. It just got to be a little bit, to me, a little bit away from, racing is the entertainment. That if Earnhardt goes out and laps the field, well, guess what? Next weekend, or somebody better come back and have something for him. That's what you go for. And so I stopped watching, and you just don't. I was going to races back in the day with Sterling Marlin, Dale Jarrett, Ricky Rudd, Ernie Irving, those guys, and Earnhardts and Petties, and all those guys, and they had a lot of personality. They're real people, and kind of what's happened is you get bigger, and it's because they had to. You get more money, more corporate sponsors. Nowadays, the drivers are like, behind the scenes are getting, well, this is what you can say, this is what you can't say. You should wear this, you should do that. And, it's not the driver's fault. They have to be like that because of the money in it now. But the point of this soliloquy is I was absolutely shocked at the talent of drivers. I couldn't believe, I call them the kids. I'm like, yeah, I'll watch the kids. They're going to go to Daytona. I couldn't believe probably I'd say the top 15 drivers in NASCAR could easily run with anybody from back in the day. Those guys it's so hard to stick a modified right on the line and make it work for, however long you need to work. These guys were driving these huge cars and absolutely Goodyear did a Goodyear. The tire was good, but I couldn't believe the talent. So that's kind of pulled me back in. I'm going to watch the first 5 or 6 races of the season and kind of see how I feel after that. But I couldn't believe the driver talent. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of share some of your same thoughts there on where the racing's come from. I grew up as a kid watching in the very, very early 90s, 90, 91, stuff like that's when I really started watching or old enough to watch and understand what was going on. And I'm going back with groups of friends and watching those type of races because that brings back memories for one. But it was exciting racing. Even though we don't have like large packs in that, there is racing, there's passing and stuff like that. And absolutely. The drivers in NASCAR, I know it's easy making fun of them because I do it myself sometimes. So easy to make fun of them, but when you actually see what they're capable of doing, it's pretty amazing. So definitely agree with your assessment on all of that. I do want to ask you because you grew up around Winston-Salem, Bowman Gray. We talked about that. Is that the place that really got you hooked on racing, or was there something else?
I would say yes and no. I grew up, again, talking the 80s, early 90s. So we would go to the races. I've been to them all, man. Darlington, North Wilkes, you got Hickory, South Boston, North Wilkesboro, Richmond, Charlotte. I mean, I've been to them all. And so I would say that was a big part of it because you could go to see, back then NASCAR was mostly the Southeast, was more of a regional deal. And RJ Reynolds Tobacco basically helped make NASCAR what it is today. If it wasn't for their sponsorship money, again, Winston-Salem, there's the tie-in, NASCAR would never be what it is today. But it was a combination of that and Bowman Gray. But, it's interesting, even back then, this is going to be kind of wild. Even back then, when you're going to see, hey man, I'm going to go see Kyle Petty and Earnhardt and the guys race. We're going up to Martinsville. Then you get back, it'd be an off week, or they were away somewhere where you weren't going to go, and you go to Bowman Gray. Even back then, it was sort of like, yeah, man, you're walking back in time to this is a lot of history here. You got to pay the respects, and so it was even better. So it was a combination. It wasn't really. It was probably part Bowman Gray, part Winston-Salem, part just the way NASCAR was followed in the Southeast, especially in the Carolinas back in the day.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that. I can remember the first time that I went to Darlington to watch an Xfinity Series race, and then we stayed the next day and watched the Cup Series. But for me, that was the same type of thing. From a NASCAR perspective, it was like stepping back in time because things hadn't changed all that much from where that track has been, 20, 30 years ago. So I definitely love those tracks. Another place that's kind of on my bucket list is North Wilkesboro to kind of go to just because of that same reason. So, definitely. So, I guess the only other question I got before we kind of move on is there any other type of racing besides what we've talked about so far that you kind of grew up with or enjoyed going to over the years?
Yeah, so my dad was a race car driver. As his primary hobby, he drove Formula Ford. He drove a Can-Am car. He had an Elva. And so when now we're going back to the 70s. When I grew up when I was in the 70s with him, he'd take his he had a Winnebago, and he'd pull his cars, and we go to he was a road racer obviously, so we'd go to VIR, we'd go to Road Atlanta, we'd go to Tennessee, we'd Daytona, so it was I think Daytona once from what I remember, but it was in his sort of DNA, and he really he's a huge fan of Formula One back in the 70s. So we did that. That was fun. I mean, one other last sort of tidbit I'll say on Bowman Gray is, it's known as the Madhouse. A lot of people don't know this. It's not the Madhouse because of the craziness. Maybe it should be, but that's not really the reason it's called the Madhouse. They used to do this race way back in the day, and they did what was called a mad scramble. And I don't know if it was, it might have been like the old school Le Mans where people run to their cars, get in, start them up, and then drive off. Maybe that was the mad scramble. I'm not sure, but that's where the Madhouse actually came from. And of course, now it's really kind of like something else now, but it originally wasn't like that.
Right. No, I I love that you got so much history that you can tell to others because I'm somebody I try to keep up with where racing is in general at all the different sites, but it's always awesome hearing somebody that's got a little bit extra of information that you've never heard. So that's awesome. One last question before I step away from Bowman Gray. We'll get into some other fun stuff, but are you a Jason Myers or a Tim Brown fan, or neither?
Yeah, so Bert and Jason are brothers. I don't really care for Bert. I do like Jason Myers. I'm not really a big Tim Brown fan, but of the three of them, Jason is the underdog and he's the younger brother of Bert. I think Bert's more of he's more of a media guy than really. He's won a lot there, but it was interesting in the modified race there. Jason was behind Bert. He was actually faster than Bert, but he didn't pass him. He didn't get a little rough with him, but that's okay. But yeah, I'm more of a if I'm watching Bowman Gray Weekly Series. And by the way, I'll give a plug to the Yesteryear YouTube site, Yesteryear Racing YouTube site. I have the 2022, 2023, 2024 every single race of the Bowman Gray Weekly Series on the YouTube channel as a replay. So anybody that wants to go see what the Madhouse really is week to week basis. I mean, they do street stocks and late models and occasional demolition derby. You can go to the YouTube site, but yeah, I'm a Jason Myers guy. If I had to choose a driver, if I'm back in North Carolina going there every week.
Yeah, I have very little experience as far as in person or anything, but I have seen several Jason Myers fans when I've gone to different car shows or racing events. Just wearing his shirts and displaying the product, and I always thought that he was an underdog, but somebody worked very hard to try to be successful there at the track. So yeah, that's cool to hear. I guess let's move on into some other stuff. So I do want to discuss some of your love just for modified racing in general here in a minute, but first let's get into the exciting IROC series that Yesteryear is getting ready to start here on February 18th, just a couple of weeks away. So what was it about IROC racing in general that made you want to put something like this out on iRacing?
Yeah, that's a good question, JR. And actually, you'll be driving in the IROC series, so that's great. But and I've never raced a race with you, and I won't. I didn't qualify for my own series, so I won't be in that field. But I'll be up in the booth with Soup and Shaggy. About halfway through the modified season last year, the inaugural season, it kind of hit me that, this is a little bit more than just a sim racing league. You're kind of launching a brand. And when you're launching a brand, that brings in a whole different animal. And so I started doing little advertising here and there. We sponsored, we were on the back of Jeff Malconey's Winchester 400 car, and I started doing some real life stuff just to get the name out there. And then you're like, well, how can I extend the brand? And because Yesteryear, just to recap for anybody that doesn't know, we don't do every single week on a certain night. You're racing. We do a real 15 race modified season. That's about what a real Whelen modified season, smart modified tour season is. It's 15 races, 14 to 16 races. And we run actual distances and stuff, races that have happened in history because of all the parameters you can tweak on iRacing, weather and all that stuff, rules. So about halfway through the season, I realized this is a brand. So I was trying to think of how can I extend this? And you're like, the first thing you think of is another series. And I'm like, I'm kind of a one-man show. I have a couple people that help me out, but I can't do every single week. That's not going to work. And then it hit me one night. I'm like, I remember watching the old in the 80s and 90s again, the old IROC series where they'd get, Al Unser Jr. from, IndyCar and somebody else from Champ Car and some, Earnhardt, Gordon Johncock, Labonte. They'd bring in an F1 driver, a rally car driver, and they'd have them go to these tracks and they'd almost like a kind of an all-star thing, but not really because, you're not going to get Nelson Piquet from the Formula One champion is not going to come race IROC. So it wasn't quite an all-star. So it's kind of a play on that, except I made it a little bit more, you really have to qualify for this series. I wanted to give a bump to the 3 racing leagues that send drivers to yesteryear. That will be Red Light Racing, Bootleg Racing League, and the Old Bastards Racing League, OBRL. If this thing's a success, maybe it gives somebody a reason to participate more and try to make it next year. And I also wanted to tweak it a little bit. It's this season's loosely based, with quotation marks, on the 1985 IROC series, which they raced Daytona, Mid-Ohio, Talladega, and Michigan. Now, if you look at Talladega, Michigan, and Daytona, it's sort of like, well, these are all kind of super speedways, and I wanted to make it more of I wanted to keep it mostly oval, but make it a little different. So that's why we have a super speedway in Daytona coming up in, I guess, a little less than 2 weeks, a road course Mid-Ohio, a 1.5 mile oval in Atlanta 2008, and then we end with a short track at Thompson. So it's sort of like different disciplines, because super speedway is, one way to drive an oval, and it's all drafting. So I just kind of wanted to mix it up a little bit. So that's why I say it's loosely based on it. But that was the reason, is I wanted to try to extend the brand without sort of breaking my back and the time I'd have to put into it. And, I think people can deal with 4 races on a Tuesday night a year. That's kind of where it came from.
No, that's awesome, and you spoke about the 4 racetracks. That was another question I had, because I'd looked up the original '85 IROC schedule that you mentioned, and I knew you had changed it a little bit, and for obvious reasons. But what made you pick those other 2 tracks? Atlanta 2008 version of it, which is awesome, and then also Thompson. Was there something specific, or is that just kind of tracks that in general you enjoy?
Yeah, no, it wasn't really anything specific. I mean, I think the Daytona and the Mid-Ohio were actual to the series in '85. The Talladega race never happened in '85. It was rained out, so that one actually didn't happen. And then you had Michigan. Also, geographically, I kind of wanted to, we're talking, we're doing it sim racing, so it doesn't really matter geographically, but it's kind of cool. So we got a deep south, we got the Florida. We got a southeast in Atlanta. We got a New England and Thompson up in Connecticut, and then of course we're sort of in Mid-Ohio for the road course. So that was part of it, but mainly I just wanted to get different disciplines in there, because I've raced enough leagues, and I'm sure you have too, to know that some people are really good on super speedways, but they don't really know they don't even know what they're doing on a short track. So I wanted to make sure that I got a very diverse group of tracks where it's just not all super speedway and drafting, and people that do that really well. OBRL comes to mind, because they race all kinds of tracks, but they follow mostly the Cup Series, so they race a lot of 1.5 mile ovals and super speedways, and whereas Red Light and Bootleg don't race as much. So you kind of you got that, you're mixing it up a bit so that you kind of get a diversity with the track. So it was more like, let's follow history a little bit, but I'm going to steer off for the last 2 races, because I don't want to race. I don't want this thing to be a total super speedway show.
Yeah, awesome. I like that thought process. It's great to take some of the history and then modify it just slightly, so it makes for a better product overall. I think, and yeah, exactly right. So a lot of leagues, they get a little bit complacent on running the same type of tracks, all the time, either short tracks or larger super speedways or whatever, NASCAR style, and yeah, it's great to see all of that come together, and I'm pretty excited about the road course that's on the schedule there. We'll see how it works out. I'm hit or miss, but I do enjoy the road course racing. I do, I guess. So you touched on it a little bit. So the IROC series, it is invitational, and you talked about the 3 leagues primarily that drivers are coming from. Was that something, I know you race in a lot of leagues, is that something that you kind of thought of, a collaboration with someone, kind of said, hey, let's do this with multiple leagues?
Yeah, so when I started yesteryear, I kind of took a shortcut and went to, OBRL is sort of what I call my home league, just because that was the first one I joined, and they're great. And I've got to know Lowell really well, and Lowell's a wealth of he's been doing this forever. So I'll bounce, if I come up to something, I'm like, let me bounce this off of you. And then Red Light was actually the first league that I followed, even though I couldn't join because Mondays and Thursdays are tough for me. So I couldn't really join that. But I took a shortcut in that, I'm like, I need clean drivers for this. So let me kind of go out to these leagues and see if anybody wants to race. And, and they did. And so that's kind of how I got the drivers that participated were coming from these leagues, and they were kind of already clean. So it was a little bit of a shortcut. And then, with the series, I wanted to make, again, it kind of be exclusive, because if it's a big success, or if it's a success, people, maybe somebody that looked pretty cool, I wish I could race in that. Well, the only way you can race in it is if you support your league that you're in and you win a series. And to prove that point that, that's the way you got to do it, I didn't qualify, so I'm not racing. I came close. I was in the BRL SK and finished second in the standings to Todd Liston, who, by the way, he's a painter also, and trading paints. He did all the colors for the cars that'll race in the IROC. They're just the same colors that they used in history. But I finished second to Liston, so I come from the people in the South will like this. I come from the Ric Flair school of thought, where it's like, hey man, to be the man, you got to beat the man, and if you don't beat the man, you don't get to play. And that's exactly I don't get to play, but that's okay, because I want to make sure that being a race director and being up in the booth with Soup and those guys as a third, it's going to be fun. If this thing's going to be a success, it makes sense for me not to be racing in it, at least in year one. But if it's a success and I don't make it next year, I won't race again next year either.
No, absolutely. Yeah, everything that you've talked about for that IROC series, it sounds extremely cool. Not something that you normally see leagues do on iRacing. So, you spoke about, I'm lucky enough to get to participate in it this year, and that's extremely cool. Again, nobody on iRacing really does that. I have raced in something where they called it an IROC series in the past, but it was nowhere near this. It was more NASCAR style and not as enjoyable, I will say. But thank you so much for putting that on and having it broadcast on the VGN network for others to enjoy, because hopefully that does pique some interest and get some drivers, interested in wanting to join some leagues and see if one day, they can participate in that as well. So, definitely looking forward to it. And, again, the IROC series, that starts up on February 18th, but the Yesteryear Racing League with the modifieds, that's going to kick off its season the week after on the 25th. And I think you guys start off at Daytona. So tell us a little bit about that awesome series and how it's different than some of the others that are on the service.
Yeah, so with again, Yesteryear comes from we're racing historic races, kind of re-racing historic races, and actually historic series that have happened in the past. So last year we did a combination, because again, iRacing doesn't have every single track that these cars race on. So we did a combination of the 1990, it was called the Winston Modified Series back in 1990, and the 1990 Southern Modified Auto Racing Teams Series, Smart Tour. And when you combine the 1990 races that those two tours raced in, I could get a 15-race season. So this year we're going all the way back to 1966. And of course, the cars looked a lot different back then, and we can't really, iRacing doesn't have the cars. So we're racing the modern day cars, but we're racing on the tracks, on the rules, on the weather, on the series that actually races that actually occurred in history. And that was only, 17 years after NASCAR was formed. So there wasn't really a tour back then, but you had these guys like Richie Evans, and well, actually that was a little bit before Richie Evans. But you had these. He maybe came to the tail end of that. But you had these guys just touring all over the Southeast, mainly in the Northeast. Making money running these races, and there was a ton of races to choose from. But yeah, man, believe it or not, in 1966, the modifieds, again, they looked a little bit different than they do today. They raced the oval. They raced Daytona. They raced Atlanta because Atlanta was a new track back then. It was a brand new track. So we've got some, and of course you got your Hickories in there, and it's a little bit more balanced than it was last year. We were very heavy on short track last year, and by short track I mean that half mile oval. Throw Richmond in there, being 0.75. We did race Pocono, the Race of Champions, which was I consider Pocono a super speedway. But this year there's a balance of bull ring, short track, and a few oddballs like Daytona and Atlanta and Pocono again kind of thrown in there. So it should be interesting, man. It's going to be kind of wild. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing it for sure. And like you mentioned, some of the races, the tracks are kind of based loosely, on the series back then. But the other thing is the point system. So you guys are running, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to learn, but the point system is going to be based loosely, at least, on what it was with the modifieds back then. And also in the sim, it looks like you guys are going to be running real-time weather from that specific date. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's part of what we do at yesteryear. We did it last year. Is we take the weather and the day, because you can look at the newspaper and get a lot of. I have a subscription to newspapers.com. You can go back to the Civil War if you need to, and you can kind of look at an article and see the day, and Racing Reference is a good one, and you can get the weather for that particular day the race happened, and the cloud cover, the humidity, the temperature, and you can all throw it in, and you're basically like, hey man, we're running the same distance in the same weather, a little bit different cars, especially this year with 1966, but that they did back then. So that's what we did. Now, last year we ran the Latford point system, which was NASCAR's point system for many, many years. I think like 74 to 2002. It lasted a long time, the Bob Latford system. This year we're actually running a point system. We couldn't run the point system from 1966 because that was based on winnings, like money you earned, and you're just not going to be able to find how much money did the 23rd place driver win? You're just not going to be able to find that even in the newspapers. So what we're doing is, and then they changed it in 1968 to where it was pretty much 50 points for first place, 49, 48, 47, and it kind of went down like that. No extra points for leading a lap or leading the most laps. However, what they did do is it was based on distance. So any race that raced 250 miles or more would get double points. So it'd be like running two races. Any race that was under 250 miles would get that 50, 49, 48. And so we have three races, one of them being Daytona, and then Atlanta, I believe, in October, or Pocono in September, Atlanta in October. Those three races are all double points races. So if someone wants to win the old red boot, which is our trophy for the Yesteryear Racing League, they're going to have to show up to those races because that's like missing two races.
Yeah, you're right. And that makes it tough. You do not want to miss a double points race for sure. And, I'm one of the guys that gets to be lucky enough to be up in the booth calling those races. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm still trying to learn some of the procedures and rules and, looking through some of that stuff. One of them that I like, and, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but it looks like you do have an incident limit in these races, incident limit for penalties and also for, being ejected from the race. So my question on that is, what was your thinking? I like that rule, but what was your thinking? Is that to help reduce some possible aggression or, possibly teach others how to work on their racecraft?
Yeah, I mean, that was a tough one for me, actually, JR. I mean, I know that I know bootleg doesn't really have anything like OBRL's got even lower limits, but bootleg doesn't. But Below's got a tight system where there's warnings and EOLs and things, and red light doesn't really have it. But the way I kind of, and it's really to put some kind of stick out there, like, hey man, you can be a little aggressive, but don't be too aggressive, because if you're too aggressive at 13, you're going to get a drive through. At 17, you're out. And we had very few that got kicked out. I mean, you had some that over 17, and the last year that we had a decent amount that would get a drive through though, and that came into play. And the way I I toyed around with that, man, I can't tell you how much I thought about that before the season started. But the way I justified it was, look, man, if you've had a rub in with another car enough to get 13 incident points, so that's probably like maybe a little over 3 rub ins. In reality, in the real life, you're probably going to have to come into the pits and get something repaired, probably. And so that's kind of how I justified the 13. I'm like, well, at 13, you're going to get a drive through. In real life, you maybe not always, but you're probably going to have something adjusted if you've had that many rub-ins. So that's the way I adjusted it, or the way I was thinking about it. But it is sort of to keep some kind of stick out there, and there to be some kind of, during the race. And then we also have a kind of like Lowell. I stole from Lowell a little bit. We have a warning, an EOL, and then if each time you get a warning, the third and fourth are EOLs. And if you get a fifth one, then you start getting minus points in the standings. And every time you get one after that, it's minus points in the standings. And so we didn't really have anybody. I think maybe Tom Ogle. I'm going to pick on Tom because I know him. I know he was on a couple of weeks ago. He's on here, and he's a great guy. But he might have had 5 warnings last year, so he might have been one that would have gotten a 1 -5 in the standings. But other than that, I think everybody was, 4 or under. There weren't many. And I usually look at that stuff. I review it and look at it as if it's just a racing incident, I'm not going to give somebody a warning because that just happens. But if you really spun someone and then there's, you collected like 5 other cars, yeah, you're going to get a warning, man.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I can see it going both ways, having rules like that. But I appreciate it because, at the end of the day, everybody's going to get themselves in a bad position or have a race where you just can't avoid anybody and get a lot of incident points. But in general, if it's something that, is happening on a regular basis, it's probably something that needs to be brought to your attention so you focus on it a little bit more and change how your racecraft is. So, I like what you've done with that.
I think for IROC, I think for you guys, when you race IROC, I think it's set at 13. There is no drive-through. I think it's set at 13 and then you're out. But, again, there's only in the real life IROC for 1985, there were 12 drivers. We have 15. So there's not many drivers. There's 15. And you guys are obviously the best of the best, at least in 2024 you were. And so I think 13 is a good number for that few cars and just the quality of, racecraft that everybody's going to have. But so that's a little different than the yesteryear series. Plus, you're not racing modified; you're racing a Cadillac.
Right, bigger car, bigger vehicle for sure. So it's gonna be a little bit different on the aggression level, I think, with that. Alan, so from talking to you, I can see how much you love racing in general. But I want to hear a little bit, before we close out in a moment. Why are you so passionate about iRacing or sim racing? What makes you enjoy that so much?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've always been a competitive person. I used to speed skate. Rollerblades, not ice, because I grew up in the Southeast. I used to do that for quite a while when I was growing up, and just very competitive. I've always liked video games, and I went away from them for a long time. And when I came back and was looking at the racing games, Gran Turismo, and then when I saw iRacing, I couldn't believe and I race VR. I couldn't believe the technology and it's as close as you're going to get to actually racing a car. And there's a lot of advantages to it, that you're not risking bodily harm. You're not, spending a lot of money. You're not putting, fumes out in the environment. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that's kind of cool about, and don't get me wrong, there's nothing like going to the track. I mean, going to Bowman Gray was a killer, but it's just for a hobby. It's a lot less expensive than, hey man, I want a tour modified. What's that going to run me? Well, it might run you like 50 grand. And then you got to get all the, tires and on top of that. So it's a lot cheaper to buy, a rig and sim racing than it is to buy a real car. So I don't know. It's the competitiveness. It's the, being part of leagues and meeting people and being able to kind of hang out and share things, people across the country. I mean, that's probably some of the good stuff about the internet and the society and things we live in today.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. And I can attest to the spending money in real life racing. It's not fun. even when you're having good nights, you're having to replace something. So it gets very expensive. iRacing does open up an opportunity for us to be able to come out and race and enjoy ourselves. And even though some of us spend a little bit too much money on it on that side, it's nowhere near what the real life thing is. So it's great. It's great to have that. I do want to ask you, you talked about racing in all these different leagues. You are a league owner yourself. So as a league owner, what are your main goals? What are you hoping to achieve, I guess, if anything?
Yeah, man, that's a really good question. I don't know. I guess probably, entertainment. I guess, and competitiveness. I mean, that's a tough one. I think there are people who, like Lowell, who's been doing it for a very long time, and Buckley over at Red Light. I mean, and Victor at OBRL. I mean, some people are just sort of really like putting that together and organizing things like a league and, doing it. It's certainly a hobby. But the end game, what is it? I don't know. I guess for me, it's probably the closest thing is like, hey man, you created something. Wow. You kind of created something that's kind of, cause I do product management and development for a living. And I sort of took that, and to have a good product, you really it needs to be different. It needs to be unique. It needs to be appealing, to people. And I sort of took that and to my hobby and, created Yesteryear. And I think it's that. I think it's sort of like, when I look at the Yesteryear logo or when I look at the brand, I think about the brand, it's like, hey man, you actually did this. This is like your baby. And it's sort of, and I think a lot of people, in business that create things, and not in business, actually, even just nonprofits or, whatever, when you create something, it's sort of kind of special, I guess.
Nope. Yep. Can absolutely understand that, man. So one last question I got for you here. What would you say to those that are looking to get into sim racing? Do you have any advice or lessons learned that you want to pass along to those that are looking to get into this hobby? Because it is such a great hobby to have.
Yeah, that's a pretty easy one. Get into a league as quick as possible. I think that listen, I think the platform is great. I think iRacing it's up here in Massachusetts, headquartered right, here in Massachusetts, outside of Boston. And I think they could do, as any company, a better job with some of the things, cleaning up or maybe adding a premium tier or something for people that just, don't want to, every race, like a couple laps in, you're dealing with flags. But yeah, my advice would be, I said that pretty quick, like, join a league as quick as possible. In a way, that's probably, but I think finding a car, there's so much to choose from. Probably knowing the style of racing you like, how much time you have, how much time you're going to devote to it, and then going out and you got to go out and get your licenses. And if you're going to ever compete in the special events or anything. But then maybe get in a league as quick as possible.
No, yeah, and that was an answer I was kind of hoping from you, because that's one thing that I learned. I wasn't on the service more than probably 6 months when I was like, man, you got to get yourself into a league if you really want to get the most out of this, and be able to get that camaraderie, with people, and you're not just racing a computer. You're racing people. You need to be able to connect with those people. So very cool. And
I got one question for you, man.
What you got?
So the AI that we use, we use an AI system in yesteryear. The AI has got you pegged at, like, I think maybe 7th, about mid pack in a couple weeks in the IROC race, the first one in Daytona. You think he can beat that? I was a little surprised. I was like, wait a second. I think JR should be a little higher than that, man.
No, I saw that prediction and I didn't disagree with it. Yeah, super speedways are not my forte for sure. I've ran several races, even ran a cup race at Daytona just this past weekend, and didn't come away that great. I always seem to find where the wrecks are, but probably the only race that I can say I did any good at was a road to pro race. The first year they did it at Daytona, and I came home in 5th and just barely missed the wreck in that one. So yeah, I don't disagree with that. I hope that I can do better than what the AI predicts, but I'm not too hopeful.
Yeah, we're doing odds this year too, the money line. So I don't know. Soup will be all over that. He seems to really like that, so he'll probably be all over that.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll poke me pretty good. I get to be with him up there in the booth, so be different. He's not called a race with me in it for a while, so I'm sure he'll have something to poke me about. But Alan, man, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us here today. I think everything that you have going on with the Yesteryear Racing League, both the IROC and then the 15 race modified season is amazing. It's awesome. I look forward to being a part of that this year. I am lucky enough to be one of the broadcasters in the modifieds, and then I get to take part in the IROC. So I can say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for that type of opportunity and giving a place like people like myself and others to come out and race and enjoy and be a part of the broadcast that you guys are going to put on. So yeah, just thank you, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, JR, and looking forward to the new season, man.
I look forward to it. Again, man, thank you for talking with us, and thank you for everyone joining us this week to watch on VGN Weekly. I hope everyone has a great rest of the week, and please tune into those races here on VGN coming up this weekend. Thank you guys very much.
Coming up on VGN. Tonight, Tuesday, February 18th, catch the debut of the inaugural Yesteryear Racing IROC Series live and in color from Daytona at 8:30 p.m. The RLR Skitter Creek SK Modified Series will be live from Watkins Glen on Thursday, February 20th at 7:55 p.m. The BRL Modifieds and late models from Southern National Speedway will air on Saturday, February 22nd at 7:40 p.m. The OBRL Yesteryear Cup Series goes live at 8 p.m. Eastern from Atlanta Motor Speedway on Sunday, February 23rd, all times Eastern. You can see our full schedule and more at virtualgrip.net.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of VGN Weekly. Join us next time for race recaps, interviews, and much, much more. Please like and subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of our broadcasts. If you are a league owner or potential sponsor and have a broadcasting need, please visit virtualgrip.net for info on how to get in touch with us. This has been a production of the Virtual Grip Network and the Skitter Creek Motorsports Group.